you all. It's been a really good discussion, a really good class. So thank you all for your participation in this class. Clint, what's going on next quarter?
I was just thinking, should I interrupt you and see if I can make a plug for next quarter?
Yeah.
Next Sunday, we're going to start a study of Philippians 2, basically 5 through 11, which is
cool.
Going to be kind of weird, but we're going to take that, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, that whole passage, and take it apart segment by segment. It's basically, how do we have the mind of Christ?
Okay, so next quarter, Philippians 2, how to have the mind of Christ. And what's going to be weird about that?
What's that?
What's weird about that? You said it's kind of weird.
It's 13 weeks and 6 verses.
Okay, 6 verses in 13 weeks. So cool. All right. What was that? What? Judges. Yeah.
But there's also going to be a much better class.
Yeah.
Adam and I are teaching Judges in the auditorium class as well. So.
And Adam and Art will be teaching Judges in the auditorium class. Yeah.
That'd be great for you to watch after you get home from this.
Watch that one on replay is what we're hearing. Okay, very good. All right, so I had the option of actually picking 2 different topics because we had a little bit of extra left over. So the 2 different topics that I could pick between would be lying and integrity or stress and anxiety. And in some ways, lying and integrity would be a better fit to kind of be a sequel for what Jeremy talked about last week with peer pressure, corporate pressure. But you know, I just had to pick stress and anxiety. It's like a pet topic of mine, I guess. But it's because it's like this old ad, right? I'm not just the president, I'm also the client. This is the old Hair Club for Men ad. It's one of those classic ads, right? So I'm not just a teacher, I'm also someone who struggles with stress and anxiety. Or maybe another way to say that, I guess if Paul says that he's the chief of sinners, sometimes I feel like the chief of stressor outers. I don't know if that's a word or not. You know, come from a long line of worriers, right? My parents were worriers, my grandparents were worriers. So it definitely feels like something that I understand. I've always been a little high-strung, if you know me. And I guess, I don't know if this is good news. I guess it's bad news, right? But, you know, we're not alone. So I just quickly Googled this out. Now, this is about generalized anxiety disorder, which is a very popular, you know, term these days. And I wouldn't pretend to understand everything that encompasses. But here's just some, you know, some general statistics from a study published in the CDC. And we won't get into what you think of the CDC these days. That can also be a divisive topic. But during 2019, when they surveyed a group of people, you can kind of see some of the notes here, some of the numbers, that about 10% of adults experienced at least mild symptoms of anxiety within the past 2 weeks of, I believe, of the study that they were doing. While 84.4% experienced no or minimal symptoms. It actually doesn't sound too bad. Wouldn't mind being in that group. But I also thought that this was interesting as we're talking about, you know, this group in here, that it was more likely to be felt by those in the 18 to 29 year old age group, and then decreasing with age. That's what I keep hoping for, too. So, and it also says here that women were more likely to experience symptoms of anxiety than men. So. Again, I don't know, I don't like to put a whole bunch of time into statistics, but I think it's kind of obvious that societally, stress and anxiety are still something that we struggle with, which might also be kind of ironic because it feels like we should have, you know, we've got it better than ever before in some ways. So, so let's talk for a second, a little bit of discussion. What are some of the sources of stress and anxiety in our lives? And this is back to what Ed was asking. He said, what was the IRL again? So this is Christians in real life. Originally, this class was going to be Christians in the workplace. We tried to expand it a little bit because not all of us are necessarily spending most of our time in the workplace. But let's talk about it. What are some of the ways that stress comes up in the workplace? Or for some of us, how about in the home? I love this. I Googled chaotic family, and this guy's really struggling to make dinner here. He's a little distracted by the game. And or you know, stress in the classroom. I think these people are like doing a test, and that alone just kind of implies stress. So what are some of those sources of stress and anxiety, at least in your lives? I want to hear from you. I could like go on for a while.
Information, too much information.
Oh, information overload, too much information. Okay, why is that stressful?
You hear everything. You hear everything bad going on in the entire world.
Wow. You hear everything bad going on in the entire world. Yeah, yeah, it's a good point.
Ashley will not let me listen to like the 5-minute news segment in the car with the boys because it's usually a building's collapse, there's been a shooting, and she's like, I don't want the boys to hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, it's the last, what they do is they release 5 minutes of news for every hour.
Yep.
And that's just the top news for that hour. It's usually something that's depressing.
Yeah, yeah. So the news can be very depressing and stressful, and you hear all the worst. All the bad news makes news. Yeah. What else?
For me, it's like I'm an expert procrastinator.
Yeah.
Just impending deadlines of any kind. So something at work that's coming up, or a test that I know that's coming up, and get myself in a situation where I'm super stressed because I procrastinated like crazy or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Deadlines. And again, some of that is self-inflicted with procrastination, is what Zach's saying. I'm trying to relay it to the stream. What else?
Having to do anything outside of the norm, anything outside of what you're comfortable doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having to step up and do that kind of thing.
Going outside your comfort zone, doing something that's out of the norm. Absolutely. It totally makes sense. Brad?
I think mine's actually kind of related to Jeremy's, but being like, I guess in my position, if I can't figure something out, there's no further resources to go ask for help. So I kind of have to figure it out because nobody else is
Yeah. When
in certain situations, so that can be very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. When you feel like you have to figure it out because there's no one else that can do it. Absolutely. Yeah. Good call out. Bailey.
I guess kind of going back to the statistic of it kind of being higher in the like 18 to 20 range or whatever you were saying. Growing up,
Yeah.
just having to do all the adult things
Yep.
and learning how to do all that, and I mean past traumas that you experienced when you were younger, things like that.
Yeah. Adulting can be stressful. Yeah. I think one of the other realizations is now something I've noticed, since being an adult, is that mess on the floor. You're like, oh, I got to clean that up. No one else is going to do it, right? So, yeah, Dana.
I was going to say time constraints versus multiple responsibilities.
Ooh, yeah. Time constraints versus multiple responsibilities. And with that inherently comes priorities and prioritization. And, you can't do it all. Yeah, absolutely. That's really good.
I think having a child 18 to 29.
Having a child 18 to 29 can be a source of stress. That's the truth. Adam.
I feel like
Kidding, not
thing
kidding.
is
Sorry, not
so
sorry.
much of our lives are like set up. You've got to accomplish this, to accomplish this, to accomplish this, to accomplish this. And any setback just feels like you're not being successful as an adult.
Wow.
And I'm noticing that with our kids, right? They need to be in these kinds of schools, and they should probably be playing a sport because we want them to be healthy. And we've got all of these things that we want them to do, right? And it just seems that the world has this idea of, well, you need to provide for your family. Well, you're going to need a good job. You get a good job, you're probably going to need college. When you get a good college, you're going to need good grades. You don't just need good grades, you also need extracurriculars. Like all of this stuff that we've lined up that has to be in line in order to arrive at some place.
Yeah.
Just is so stressful.
Yeah, so even sometimes having a plan, it's good to have a plan, but sometimes those setbacks in a plan can be extremely stressful as well. Yeah, very good. Brad.
Another comment about the priorities, that can be stressful because, say if you have dozens of projects going on for dozens of different people, it's kind of the stress or fear of letting those people down because every task they assign you is their number one priority, right?
Yep.
So you may have a list of tasks, but they're expecting you to do theirs first before anyone else's.
Yeah, yeah.
That can be difficult.
Yep, the stress of letting other people down. Yeah, Jeff.
Not taking time to take care of yourself causes people to be stressed out.
Yep.
Like we talk about, and just listening to everybody in here, we all have a bunch of stuff going on in our lives, but if I don't take, 10 minutes a day or an hour a day, or whatever it is, whatever I need, however many minutes a week to just spend some time doing stuff that I like, that I enjoy, that relaxes me, then I become more stressed.
Yeah, so it can be stressful if you're not even feeling like you have time for yourself. Very good. Yep.
You also mentioned earlier how like we have it better now than we ever did, but we also are living in one of the fastest paced societies
It's true.
ever before. So having all those priorities and also the advancement of technology and stuff has just made it to where we can do so much different stuff at
Yeah, so fast-paced society and multitasking. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, did you have something too,
Yeah,
Zach?
just paired with that, like keeping up with the Joneses. I think
Yep.
social media has really caused us to think that we need to like compare
Oh, yeah.
ourselves to everyone, and it
Yep.
can be super stressful when you feel like you fall short. Or
Yeah.
just constantly having that in the back of your head.
Yeah, so always like feeling a little inferior compared to what something amazing that someone online posted. Yeah, that.
So delete Facebook.
Yeah, delete. Zach puts in an ad to delete Facebook, so get off the stream right now. No, I'm just kidding. This Facebook's okay. All right.
We love that.
I'm surprised no one said finances yet.
Yep, finances, absolutely a major stressor. Yes.
Things that we think we cannot control or we can't control. I know a lot of times I'm like, oh, I got this, and then
Yeah.
when push comes to shove,
Wow.
I'm like, like freaking out and he's mad at me because I'm crying.
I do not get mad about it.
Okay.
I get mad at her because she stresses about it.
All right. Yeah. So the things that we think we can control or struggle to control, absolutely. Or we're even worried about the things we can't control. We talk a lot about that. So, okay. Well then, let's talk for a little bit about. Let's actually name it. Right? How can stress and anxiety affect us? I think we all understand this, but let's hear it. How can it affect you? Yeah. You don't sleep. Yeah. Insomnia. Absolutely. What else?
Make you sick to your stomach.
Sick to your stomach. Wow. Yeah. I remember the movie Remember the Titans, and it's like before that first game, and the coach is puking, out behind the stands. Yeah, that is stress right there. I don't think he had the flu. I don't think they were implying that. Yeah, to make you sick to your stomach. What else?
Can impact how you deal with people. You mess up your relationships, you bite people's heads off.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, I'm just saying.
Uh-huh.
Some people
Oh,
do.
Adam does. Adam does. Clint doesn't. It can affect our relationships. Absolutely. What else?
Lose hair?
Yeah, you could lose your hair. Yep. Bailey.
Our mom stressed herself out so much that she gave herself like a stomach ulcer.
Wow. Yeah, you can give yourself an ulcer. Yeah. Thumbs down. Okay. All right. Yeah. So a couple things we already talked about. I think about Proverbs 12:25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Writer of Psalms has it pretty well, right? It can feel like a physical weight. It can actually weigh you down. So yeah, we talked about it, physical effects, ulcers, insomnia. For me, it might be high blood pressure, or this is the other one I feel a lot. I don't know about you guys. Exhaustion. I just feel so tired. I get very lethargic. There's a fancy word, I don't know if it really matters, but psychosomatic, this idea of your mind and your body kind of interact together. And it's actually quite amazing how God made us, but it's frustrating too. And it's like, man, wish I didn't have this kind of stress and these reactions to this stress. I also put this one down. For me, it can be debilitating. I find that it leads to inaction, which is kind of funny. It's like sometimes I'm so stressed out that I just don't know what to do next, and it's easier to kind of run away, or maybe it feeds back into that procrastination loop until you hit that deadline, then there's no running away from that anymore. And like Clint mentioned as well, it can hurt relationships. Unfortunately, when we're under stress, I heard someone say this before. I heard someone say, you are who you are when you're under stress. And I never like that, because I don't think we're at our best when we're under stress. But I understand what they're saying too, right? The other terrible way that it's put today is if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. That's just so awful. But it's really bad. But you get that idea, and we don't want to be that person, but it's going to be more natural, I guess, to be crankier, to be short-tempered, have a shorter fuse when you're stressed. Those things naturally happen. So Zach taught about discouragement a couple weeks ago, and if we end the class right now, I think that's where we'd all be, so maybe we should just keep on going. Let's see what Jesus had to say about anxiety. I could use a reader for Matthew 6, 25 through 34. Matthew 6, let's take a look there. 25 through 34. Yeah, go for it, Clint.
Therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more than food and the body more than clothing? Consider the birds of the sky. They don't sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you worth more than they? Can any of you add one moment to your lifespan by worrying?
Probably the opposite.
And why do you worry about clothes? Observe how the wildflowers of the fields grow. They don't labor or spin thread. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was adorned like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and thrown into the furnace tomorrow, won't he do much more for you, you of little faith? So don't worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? For the Gentiles eagerly seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you. Therefore don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
Each day has enough trouble of its own. Very good. Yeah, the Christian Standard used the word worry. The ESV has anxious. I think we can understand they're similar ideas. And again, in verse 27, how can worrying add a single hour to your life? And it's probably going to do exactly the opposite, right? We talk about those physical effects of worrying. I'm going to try to take this in a bit of a different direction. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, and I couldn't help myself. And some of you have already discussed this with me before, but is anxiety a sin? Just based on this passage.
I've struggled with that
Yeah.
question, John, because it's a command coming right from Jesus' mouth.
Right.
Not word for me.
Yeah.
And so, and I think for me, when I looked, thought about this and looked at these passages, I think it can become a disobedience to that command when I wallow in it, when I stay there, and that's all I am thinking about or focused about. And I've definitely had times in my life where I was probably spending too much time worrying about something versus giving it over to God and moving on.
Yeah.
Just coming back to it over and over again.
Yeah. Okay. So wallowing in it, absolutely. Yeah. Maybe.
I guess I have a hard time thinking about it as anxiety versus worrying.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, anxiety is more of like a medical term almost,
Oh,
where
okay.
like sometimes you don't have very much control over it, and it just happens, and
Mm-hmm.
you might have panic attacks, you
Yeah.
might have things that are out of your control, and
Mm-hmm.
so
That's true.
thinking of anxiety as a sin is hard for me. I do think
Yeah.
that wallowing in those worries and not like giving that up to God, I think that can be sinful. But as far as anxiety goes, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. Michaela?
I think I wanted to add on to that because I had really bad postpartum anxiety,
Mm,
and
mhm.
obviously that was hormone related, and I physically, like, I had to get on medicine for a while because there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah.
And then slowly it went away, and I learned, I guess, to deal with the worry versus anxiety. I do think there's separate, like, I hate to think that my hormone imbalance is a sin because I had so much crazy anxiety,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
think there's a difference in the two.
Yep. Yeah. Jeff?
So when I find that I'm like really anxious about things, it's because I want to play God,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
that is a sin.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to control my life and act like I'm God, in my mind that's a sin. But
Yeah.
I don't want to like shame anybody in here.
No, no, no.
They were just talking about, I have no idea anything about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can add on about hormones.
I'm
No?
good. But I'm just saying, like, general, like, anxiety type stuff, like, for me, like, that's literally me trying to play God, because I'm so
Yeah.
worried about a million different things going on in my life,
Yeah.
when I should be turning them over and just being like, you know what, hey, here, you take care of this, and I'm gonna go be of service to other people.
Right.
And that generally takes care of about 90% of, like, the problems in my life.
Yeah. So trying to play God can be a sin. Yeah, absolutely. I got Dana and then Clint.
I think an example that comes to mind for me is with Peter walking on the water.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets called out for doubt,
Mm-hmm.
and that most of the time is kind of the source of our anxieties, because we're just
Doubting.
failing to put our trust in the right place.
Yeah.
But you'll notice that Jesus says, why did you doubt? But
Right.
it's not a severe reprimand, such as giving to the Pharisees for things they're doing.
Hypocrisy kind of thing. Yeah. So like Peter on the water and being encouraged about why did he doubt. Clint?
Thinking in the context of what we're talking about here with the anxiety that Jesus is talking about, the worry,
Yeah.
I think I'm stealing Kara's comment here, is it's that whole idea of control.
Control.
And that's why I think when he gets to verse 33, he says, just see God's kingdom first. That we're not going to control everything. I mean,
Okay.
there's something about men, I think, that, this whole idea of worrying about shelter and food and clothes. We see those, those are our responsibility to our families, for instance, but I think sometimes we justify that worry because we say, well, I've got to be concerned about that. I've got to worry about my finances and my this and this and this.
To be a good steward.
When it becomes what Jesus is talking about, it does become kind of like what Jeff said.
Yeah.
It's I'm not in control, and I want to control everything.
Yeah.
What I need to do
Yep.
is just hand it over to God and let Him control.
Yeah, Jeremy, did you have something too?
Yeah, and I was looking at verse 32.
Yep.
And this is kind of where you might be able to draw a line between, when does it become maybe sinful?
Mm-hmm.
In the NIV, it says, chasing after these things.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
when, referring back to 31, when talking about what are we going to, what are we going to do?
Yep.
What are we going to live? What are we going to eat? And he uses the word pagans in the NIV. Here in the NASB, it's eagerly seeking. Like they're
Eagerly
getting
seeking. Yep.
And so, it kind of is, he's calling out, I guess, this idea that when that's all we're focused on, and that's, we're chasing these things down, we're eagerly seeking these things, and
Yeah.
maybe taking our focus off the fact that really God's the one that's going to provide these things for us, not us. Maybe that's when it turns more into a sinful situation.
Yeah, that's really well said. Talking about in verse 32, the Gentiles or the pagans eagerly seeking after these things. Let's go, Brad, and then Rebecca.
I think I used to have, for lack of a better word, an unhealthy or maybe unrealistic view of anxiety until I guess maybe about a year and a half ago or a year ago. For the first time, I truly felt anxiety pretty badly. And before I would feel stressed out or whatever, but it was like something I could handle and kind of
Yeah.
subdue or whatever. And I would probably relate worrying and stress as kind of the same thing, and it's like something you can control.
Mm-hmm.
But anxiety is like something that's very difficult to control. Kind of like Bailey said, it's almost like a physical manifestation where you can't even control it.
Well.
And then hopefully over time you get out of it or whatever. But,
Sure.
I used to think when somebody say I struggle with anxiety, I'm just like, well, can't you just,
Stop
get
it.
over it?
Yeah.
But like,
Stop it.
Then when I first experienced it, it's difficult.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing, Brad. Rebecca?
A couple of things. The first is I'm wondering, like, hearing everybody talk, if maybe this verse is less about anxiety and more about getting priorities straight. This section, because that seems to be the crux of the matter there. But the other thing is that, I don't, looking at Jesus in the garden after he prayed, when he was, I would say stressed.
Yeah.
I would say
Yep.
anxious. He was bleeding,
Yep.
from the stress of it all. And he didn't sin. That wasn't a sin.
Right.
So I'm using that as an example. I'm not sure you can call anxiety a sin.
Okay. Spoiler alert. I won't repeat that because that's where we're going next. So, very good. I didn't go over the slides with her. I should have read it first. That's a good call out. Yeah, so the thinking here is Jesus said don't be anxious. If you're anxious, you're disobeying Jesus, so you're sinning if you're anxious. But as we talked about, maybe it's not, that simple to boil it down to. And I wonder sometimes if this is supposed to be more about a commandment or an encouragement in some ways. Let me also say that this is back to what Jeremy and Rebecca were saying as well. What is Jesus warning us not to be anxious about or not to worry about? He's talking about the things that you're seeking after as well, priorities, and we're going to get back to that in a second. Zach?
I was just going to say, specific to this verse, I don't think he's calling out anxiety being a sin. I think
Mhm.
he's calling out lack of faith due to anxiety being a sin.
Well, yeah.
When our anxiety or stress causes us to not have faith in God,
Yeah.
His ability to deliver, that's when it's a sin.
So lacking faith being the problem.
And I think kind of like what Jeremy was saying, what the Gentiles seek after, a lot of it is like manufactured anxiety that we
Oh, I see.
put ourselves into,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And we build up these things and then we get so invested in them
Yeah.
when they fall down. But when it's the fundamental things like where am I going to sleep or eat, or like those are the things that we need to turn to God. And if we don't, then I think we're having a lack of faith in God's ability to deliver us.
Yeah. some of the lack of faith in God's ability to take care of us. Yeah, very good. Okay, we're going to keep going. This is excellent. I wanted to take a look, so I kind of decided, all right, can we take a look at some cases where Bible characters are stressed? And that's where we're going to get to what Rebecca was talking about. But I chose Paul as a starting place here. And I use the word anxiety, but as we talked about, maybe there is a differentiation between this and worrying, which I appreciate that's come out in the conversation. A couple of verses here that I pulled out, because I see Paul I think he's kind of high-strung too, but that's just maybe me viewing him through my own lens. But Philippians 2:28, talking about sending Epaphroditus to the Philippians, he says, I am the more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, and that I may be less anxious. Or 2 Corinthians 11:28, he says, apart from these things, these are ESV, by the way, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. I think this definitely comes out in Paul's letters, the anxiety that he has for the other churches, the concern he has for them. A couple other instances of this. Galatians 4:9 through 11. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid I may have labored over you in vain. You see, again, fear, concern. He's worried about the Galatian church, that all the effort he's put in there is in vain. That's another interesting, source of stress, feeling like you're working hard, really hard, and you're not really getting anywhere, or maybe it's for nothing. And another case where he brings this up, 1 Thessalonians 3:5. 1 Thessalonians we believe to be the first letter that Paul wrote, the first epistle that he wrote chronologically, and you see plenty of concern in this letter for the Thessalonian church. It says, for this reason, when I could bear it no longer, this is unbearable to him, I sent to learn about your faith, for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and our labor would be in vain. Kind of a similar concern that he had. A couple of observations. What is Paul worrying about?
Spiritual well-being of the church.
The spiritual well-being of the church. That seems to be actually back to Matthew. He seems like his priorities are in the right place, right? Seeking first the kingdom of God. So I think that's an interesting distinction to make. He didn't say I was worried about if I was going to have food to eat in prison, for example, which he underwent some of the hardest circumstances physically, but he's not necessarily stressed about those things. He's stressed about the right things. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe that even sounds weird to say. Other thoughts about Paul?
Can we go back to the right things? Maybe heavenly concern versus earthly concern?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, like heavenly concern versus earthly concern? Yeah.
Right. So if we're concerned over heavenly kingdom issues
Yeah.
versus earthly kingdom issues,
Yeah.
you could have a pretty black and white distinction between what concern is appropriate, what concern is inappropriate.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Bailey?
It also seems like, for lack of a better word, he's experiencing some doubt in his fellow Christians.
Yeah.
To the point where, he's talking about how he worries about them daily, how it's a daily struggle for him, that
Mhm.
he thinks that all of his work is in vain. And I feel like he's worried that they're not doing what he's taught them to do.
Yeah.
So he's kind of doubting their
Yeah.
faith a little bit.
Like doubt in others. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Dana, do you have something as well?
It just kind of ties in with what Adam was saying, that back in verse 33, Paul is seeking first his kingdom and righteousness. And that's
Yep.
why he has this concern.
Yeah, seeking first the kingdom. Yep. McCann?
I guess I was tying into Bailey there too. That
Good. That's cool.
it's, I don't think it's bad to worry about the church stuff because, I have family members and friends that, I just
Yeah.
get anxiety and I worry
Yeah.
about, the thought of them not making it to heaven. And,
Well.
I think that's kind of a good thing to have in the sense
Yeah.
that it, will encourage you to, keep at them
Yep.
and all that other stuff. But, he may be, to a point, some of them there where he's just, want to cry and stuff, and you're like, well, what if they don't make it to heaven? And you just, I want to beat it into him sometimes, come on, do you know what's
Yeah.
at stake here?
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. Yeah, if you're not concerned about, bringing other people to heaven, maybe you're not concerned enough about the right things. Yeah, it's a fair point. Zach?
Well, and along with what Michaela said, I feel like that's why he said it.
Right.
for all the labor and time that he invested in them. So I feel like that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yep. Let's go on. I want to take a look. I also think about David a lot and some of the depression and the issues that he went through. Now, David's got a whole other set of problems that he experienced in his life, right? Like physically being on the run several times, even having to abandon his kingdom because his kid is going to, overthrow him in an insurrection. But I mean, if we look at like some of this wording here in Psalm 31, you can see that David's not really in a great place, and he's just pouring himself out on the page. Psalm 31, just reading verses 9 through 13 from the screen. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief. This guy is crying his eyes out, right? My soul and my body also. Seeing again that relationship between the mind, the body. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away. Because of all my adversaries, I become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have been forgotten like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel. For I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. He almost sounds a little paranoid at the end of that verse, but if we know David, I don't think it actually is paranoia, right? But you can see how it's like an inner conflict. He's like, I can hear them whispering about me. And if we just, again, left it here, that would be kind of depressing. But we're going to come back to Psalm 31 because David's got some really encouraging things to say. Also, as Rebecca mentioned, Jesus in the garden. Let's take a look at this. I didn't put the verses on the screen. Luke 22, because I think, again, Jesus is our example in everything and also in dealing with stress and anxiety in the extreme. Luke 22, 39 through 46. And he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when he had come to the place, he said to them, Pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. I forget what the physical condition is, but that is a real documented thing. The idea that you can stress yourself so much that you would actually be sweating blood, which is kind of crazy. So, absolutely, in the extreme, Jesus also endured this. Now, again, what's the difference? Well, I don't think he's worried about what he's going to eat, what he's going to wear. That's not present here. You got something, Bailey? What are you thinking?
I was going to say it when Rebecca was talking about it earlier, but you mentioned it as coming back up. I think the example that he's giving us here is that you're allowed to be stressed, but even though Jesus is God, he's still giving it up to God. He's
Right.
still saying, not my will, but your will. So he's not trying to take control of the situation
Yeah.
himself. He's giving it all up. And
Yep.
I think that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, of where it becomes sinful and where it's just natural worry.
Yep. So he's turning it over to God. He's not trying to take control of the situation, which he could, being God, but he doesn't. He chooses to give it up. Yep. All right. So how should Christians deal with stress? We've got a couple of minutes here. I want to hear from you all. I have some ideas and some verses. We're running short on time, though. I hate to kill the conversation. It's been really good. Does class end at 9:45 or 9:40? I always get confused. 9:45. Okay, so we've kind of discussed around this, but how should we as Christians deal with stress and anxiety in our lives, or worry? Again, if we're going to differentiate it a bit. Okay, we'll go through a few verses. First of all, just like what we saw with Jesus, we got to take it to the Lord, right? That's the example we just looked at in Jesus. But I also, myself, always go back to Philippians 4. Philippians 4, I'll just read 4 through 7. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. There's so much there in that passage to unpack, and I'm probably not doing it justice. But I love that idea about, Paul, again, as an encouragement, is saying, let's let our request be made known to God. And a similar sentiment is in 1 Peter. Yep, go for it.
The peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever been in a situation where you're really stressed out and you pray about it and then you feel a lot better afterwards? Like there's this moment where you arrive at a peace that is inexplicable.
Mm-hmm.
Passes all understanding. That's what I think he's talking about here, right? And I've experienced it, and I think Jeff's experienced it. He's not in say. But that verse gives me a lot of encouragement. Because there's times when you're really stressed out and you give it to God, and then suddenly you're not stressed out. That peace that passes all understanding, that inexplicable peace, the peace that you don't know where it came from, that peace from God comes to you and resolves that issue.
Yeah. So that peace that passes understanding can come in that moment. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Kara.
This popped in my mind, and it's just
Yeah.
not as extreme, but I think of Martha, when she was so anxious about all the things that she was doing, and Jesus says, you need to focus on the better. You know,
Yeah.
it was,
Yep.
it's
Focus on the better.
What you're talking about, we're anxious about the things that we are trying to take control of. She was so anxious about it that she was irritable and distracted and wasn't focusing on what was right. So it's like
Yeah.
focus
Yeah.
needs to be on something. Needs to be on Jesus.
Yeah. So with Martha, having the focus in the right place. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so a similar sentiment in 1 Peter 5. Humble yourselves, starting verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. I love that idea. You can cast all your anxieties. But I also like the immediate context. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. This kind of speaks back to what you were talking about, Jeff, that I think it's going to take some humility. It takes some humility to say, I can't handle this. God, take it. Take it from me. Clint.
Not to interrupt, but I
That's
think
cool.
that's what's great about that 1 Peter verse is really, even before taking it to the Lord, the first step is to acknowledge it, to say, I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
I think Jeff said this a minute ago, it's so easy, it's easy for us to say, I
Well,
got this.
yeah.
I'm going to deal with this,
And
I
Lord
got
was-
this, yes, I got this going on.
Yeah.
I can handle it.
Yeah.
First step is humble yourself and go, man, God, I need your help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Verse 8, be sober-minded. Like,
Yep.
that's the rest of the verse. There's times when we're
Yeah.
almost drunk on anxiety,
Yeah.
that we're not thinking clearly, right? And God asks us to put ourselves in that right mind.
So be real with yourself. Absolutely. Yeah, Laura?
I think also recognizing when you can't deal with stress on your own, seeking help
Yep.
from a professional, because that's why you're there.
Yeah.
And also in this day and age, it is hard to be humble and seek help, but I mean, it's now like recognizing I can't do this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yep.
um,
Yeah, absolutely. So seeking help and using your support system. Obviously, it's going to mean praying. Your brothers and sisters in Christ, a counselor. I mean, you think about even back to Jesus in the garden, an angel was sent to comfort him. There was like a physical presence there. Yeah, Dana.
Oftentimes we have to open our eyes to things that people are going through. We
Mm.
have a tendency to want everybody to think we've got it all together.
Yeah.
We're not going to actively seek that.
Yeah.
But you had a reference to David, and there's an interesting verse where Jonathan goes to it.
Yep.
While David was at Horish in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horish and helped him find strength in God.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's not just commiserating, it's getting him focused back to God.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite passages, talking about Jonathan encouraging David in the Lord, in God. Yeah, very good. Okay, a couple other ideas here. Continue to trust in God. So I did want to come back to Psalm 31 quickly. Back to Psalm 31. David is, again, he's kind of he's in the middle of it right now. But you can see throughout this passage, I've kind of picked out the sad parts. but look at the surrounding context. Verse 3, for you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you lead me and guide me. You take me out of the net that they have hidden for me, for you are my refuge. Verse 5, into your hand I commit my spirit. Actually sounds like Jesus on the cross, right? You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. He calls him faithful. And then he talks about how he's in a really difficult place. But look at verse 14. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine on your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. So even as he's appealing to God, you see his continual trust. Like, he knows he's in a really bad place, but he's going to continue to trust in God no matter what. What an encouragement that can be. So continue to trust in God. Along with this, David does this here, right? He calls him faithful God. I would say we need to remember God's faithfulness. Rebecca always does such a good job of pointing this out to me. God has always been faithful to us. He's always taken care of us. The prime example I think of is the song, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases." Right? Great is your faithfulness. It comes from Lamentations chapter 3, which is the most unlikely of places to find those words, because Jeremiah is going through the ruins of Jerusalem. And you talk about being in a low place. How can Jeremiah, witnessing all of that, say, God, you're still faithful? It's amazing. It really is. Okay, a couple of, I think I got two more ideas, right? We need to have an eternal perspective as well. I think it's important for us to continue to look ahead. I lose perspective when I stress myself, and I think about all the times that I've worried at work throughout the years. I'm like, I don't even remember those projects anymore that I was worried about. So why do I again worry about the here and now? Well, that's kind of what we're left with. One last thought. I want to make sure we get out of here, but this gets back to what everyone was kind of saying, just trying to tie it back up. Have the right priorities. Back to Matthew 6. I think that's what we see in some of the other concerns of Paul and Jesus. We need to make sure that we're worrying about the right things, and it's hard sometimes, but I guess that's just the final encouragement, having the right priorities in our lives. All right, any other thoughts? I know it was kind of like an abrupt halt. I really appreciate all the thoughts. I think we've actually already covered a lot of these ideas in the discussion today. That sense? Okay, all right, thanks. Appreciate all the discussion.